moving on, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, has given permission for 6 councils so far to increase their council taxes, which is going to affect millions of households.
From April, people will see up to a 10% hike in their bills.
Well, let's talk to the economics professor at King's College, Jonathan Porter. Jonathan, morning to you. This is a change because before the election, if a local council wanted to raise the council tax by more than 4.99%, 5% effectively, there had to be a local referendum. This has changed now. The Deputy Prime Minister, as effectively the local government secretary, can decide, and she's given the green light to 6 councils so far, the highest increase being 10%. 10% is nearly 4 times the current rate of inflation. How are households going to pay it, and is the principle right that the Secretary of State should decide?
Well, of course, it's the local councils ultimately that decide. She's just saying they don't have to put it to a referendum. But the point is that for these councils, effectively, if they don't put up their tax by more than 5%, they're going to go bust. So this is not because they're overspending now relative to what the government thinks they should be spending. It's because they have these accumulated deficits and liabilities, which is a combination of cuts over many years. Of course, George Osborne cut grants to local authorities by, between 40 and 75% over a number of years. So a lot of councils have piled up deficits over the last few years, and for some, those deficits have come to the point of directly threatening their financial viability. So the alternative is higher taxes bailed out by central government, i.e. by all taxpayers, or going bankrupt. And so what the Deputy Prime Minister has done is says, well, we're going to let you put up taxes to get you out of that mess. More broadly, of course, the reason councils overall are in financial trouble is overwhelmingly because of the social care crisis, right? Yeah. Councils spend well over half their budgets on social care, and that number goes up and up every year because of both of demography, the aging population, and because, of course, of the well-documented problems in terms of coordination between the NHS and social care. So really, the council funding crisis is really a sort of secondary impact of the social care crisis.
Can I challenge on that point too? Because, of course, we've got a new government which had lots of time to think about what it was going to do about lots of issues. And one of the first things it's done, it's set up a long-standing review into social care. We may not get an outcome for 3 years, Jonathan. So this social care crisis for local councils is going to be exacerbated more and more every year.
I think that's a real risk. The government, to be fair, has said it won't. There will be an interim report. There will be measures that will be taken before the 3 years. But I think everyone can agree that governments of both parties have neglected social care and let us get to this point. And actually, the government does need to move urgently. And definitely, we certainly can't wait for 3 years to let things get worse and worse. That's absolutely right.
As an economics professor, Jonathan, you will have a broad understanding of the long and short-term economic implications of this country. Have you ever seen it as bad, potentially, as it is right now? And where do you see our economy going in the next, let's say, 12 months?
Well, I mean, I've been here a long time, and yes, I mean, I was here during the mid-70s, although very young then. I was also in the Treasury working for the then Conservative Chancellor Norman Lamont when we had the exchange rate, the Black Wednesday, and we were kicked out of the exchange rate mechanism by the market. So we've bounced back before. So I don't think we should be too gloomy. It is true we've had a long period of slow growth and stagnant real wages, and the last 15 years have not been good. On the other hand, the UK has a lot of economic strengths. We do very well in exporting service exports in particular, which despite Brexit, which has hit our goods exports, service exports doing very well, financial services, consultancy and so on. London is still indeed more so than it was 20 years ago, one of the great global cities. There are a lot of challenges, but I don't think we should be pessimistic about where, I don't like to say don't talk this country down, but the truth is we will get through this, of course. And I think there are lots to worry about, but also lots to be optimistic about as well.
OK, good. I'm pleased to hear that, actually. We talk so much doom and gloom about the economy. Thank you so much. Jonathan Porter's there, economics professor at King's College. Correct us if we're wrong, Jack, but isn't Birmingham one of the councils that went bankrupt?
It did. You're exactly right, Bev. It did declare bankruptcy a couple of years ago, and over this last year and over the next couple of years, hundreds of millions of pounds having to be found, millions of pounds worth of assets having to be sold off as well to try and balance the books. Last year, this local authority increased council tax by 10%. That's what Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has given permission for Bradford Council to do over the next year. Birmingham had asked for 9.99% of an increase this year, but Angela Rayner only given permission for this council to increase council tax by 7.5%. We're joined this morning by Councillor Robert Alden, who's the leader of the opposition here, Birmingham City Council, leader of the Birmingham Conservative Party. What's your reaction to that announcement that 7.5% council tax increase for residents in this city?
Well, it's another devastating blow on Brummies here. It's £114 extra a year the Labour Council are now charging. Put it into context, since they took control in 2012, that means council tax has gone up by over £800, 73%, when they pledged not to put up council tax. Brummies are now getting hit with a double whammy of higher taxes for fewer services.
I mean, what is the impact really? Because we've already seen cuts to services in this local authority because of the bankruptcy. But where is this money, this increase in council tax, where is it going to go? How is it going to be used to improve the lives of residents? Because that's ultimately, they know they're having to deal with the bankruptcy, but they would like to see improvements in services in this area too.
Well, that's what's so damning about the way this Labour administration have failed the residents of Birmingham, because this money isn't going to go towards improving services. Labour are spending it on paying off the debt that they've built up. What we're seeing now in the year ahead is the council are scrapping weekly bin collections, scrapping street cleaning. That's why we're seeing more rats on the streets. They've introduced a new rat tax on pest control charges. They're closing libraries, closing leisure centres. This is all a damning failure of this administration, and it's Brummies who are going to have to suffer for Labour's incompetence.
Now, over the course of the bankruptcy, Labour is saying that local government funding coming from what was then the Conservative government had decreased, and they'd lost, they reckoned, around £1 billion. So is the Conservative Party not some part to blame for the situation that Birmingham has found itself in because of the decrease in local government funding?
Well, the National Labour Campaign Board themselves decreed that Birmingham Labour's problems were entirely the fault of themselves. Self-made problems around equal pay, around a failed Oracle rollout, and about a failure to manage the council's budget properly over the last decade. What we've also seen now is increased national issues, like things like national insurance increases. What we saw before the budget in the autumn from the National Labour government was the council needed to save £67 million this year. Post-budget, they've got to save £165 million. That's a massive increase that's going to mean more service reductions here in Birmingham because the Labour Party are failing to deliver this council's services properly. So
what can you do then? You're leader of the opposition. What can you do with the power that you might have to put the voice of residents to the council? Because we know that that council tax is going to go up by 7.5%. That's what's been given permission for. What can you do in your power to try and help things get better for people in this city?
As we've raised on a number of occasions now, the Labour administration need to start listening to the opposition. We raised concerns about the Perry Bar development before that was put in place. That's ended up costing the council taxpayers £688 million over the next 40 years for something that never housed an athlete. We raised issues about equal pay years before the council admitted to the problems. All of these things are self-induced, and if they'd listened to other people, not just ourselves, if they'd listened to the unions, if they'd listened to the residents in the city, even the officers in the city, they could have avoided these problems. So Birmingham Labour need to start listening, and that'll help residents get better services in this city.
Right, Robert, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Councillor Robert Alden, leader of the opposition at Birmingham City Council there. As I was saying, Birmingham raising their council tax by 7.5%, Bradford by 10%, and many others by more, and those taxpayers having to face the brunt of those increases.
All right, Jack Carson in Birmingham, thanks. Let's go straight to Westminster and talk to Christopher Hope, our political editor. Chris, she's given the Deputy Prime Minister has allowed 6 councils so far to have paid council tax rises which have smashed through the inflation barrier. Under the previous administration, the Tories, there'd have to be a local referendum if it was to go above 5%. She's driven a coach and horses through that. Could Labour pay a price for this? We've got local elections coming up. in May?
Almost certainly, Andrew, and morning to you both. The increases come in April. The local elections are in May in many areas. Of course, some we'll find out this week, other a dozen or so, where they won't go ahead. And of course, Reform UK will be very cross about that because they're expected to make some inroads in both Labour and Tory seats at these May elections. And if they are delayed because of the shake-up of the structure of councils, that will be very frustrating for Nigel Farage and his team. But 3 million people facing increases of up to 10%. I mean, inflation now is 2.5%. As you say, normally there's a way of limiting these increases by requiring a local referendum for anything above 5%. It's been lifted in 6 areas. Added to that, according to the Taxpayers Alliance reporting today, the average council tax band D in 21 areas will be more than £2,500. That's in addition to that includes the 6 where they can go up and above 5%. The biggest increase is in Bradford, 10% increase there, 4 times inflation for 560,000 people. In Newham, Labour-controlled Newham, 358,000, seeing a 9% increase, same figure for 154,000 in Liberal Democrat-controlled Windsor and Maidenhead. Another increase in Birmingham, as you saw there from that councillor, 7.5% for over 1 million people, and Somerset and Trafford seeing 7.5% increases. Huge increases here. The cost of living crisis is a real issue for so many viewers and listeners to GB News. It's understood by Downing Street and frustrating they're seeing this. Of course, the verdict will be at the ballot box. They'll look at that closely, but a real concern here, not least because we've got increases in also coming probably in fuel bills, which will be further add to the pressure on household bills.